In Budapest, CIA Chief of Station Ben Malloy is supervising an op to intercept intel being passed from a Turkish intelligence agent to Russian intelligence, led by Russian Chief of Station Yvguini, who has just arrived with his men. The CIA agents identify the Turkish mole, and Ben alerts his team to intercept. One agent pretends to be Russian intelligence and collects the intel, but Yevgeny spots the interception and his men try to stop the agents. Despite their efforts, the CIA agents escape with the data. Ben, who is standing nearby, calls out to Yevgeny, who wishes that Ben was working for him. Yevgeny knows about Ben's anniversary today and the dinner he has with his wife later, as he has been hacking Ben's communications. He regrets losing his own wife due to work and wishes Ben a happy anniversary. Later, Ben buys a rose and goes to meet his wife and fellow CIA agent Farah to head out to dinner. She goes to say goodbye to friends when the building suddenly explodes, killing Farah. A few weeks later, Ben has resigned from his post as chief of station and is still tormented over the loss of his wife, and is slowly resigning himself to his new reality. He tries calling his son Nick, who is an IT student, but gets voicemail. Meanwhile, in Croatia, Nick is alerted to the missed call by his new girlfriend Veronique, but doesn't know how to explain his new direction in life to Ben, noting that Ben isn't someone he can talk to. Not too long after, Ben is called into a debriefing by the Inspector General and others who have intel that Farah may not have been as innocent as she appeared. They show Ben a photo of a Russian agent, Karen Taramov, suspected in the deaths of 2 NATO agents and working to undermine Western society. Ben wonders what this has to do with Farah until the board asks if Farah was Karen's handler. Ben angrily denies this, noting that Farah took what she did for the CIA seriously. The board wonders if he is willing to do a polygraph to prove his claims, and Ben confidently accepts. Ben thinks the Inspector General is trying to smear Farah's name, and his lawyer Ted agrees. Deputy Director of the CIA Williams then reassures Ben that he has his back. Hearing this, Ben thinks they have a chance at clearing Farah's name. He cannot bring himself to believe that Farah, the woman he loved and raised his kids with, could be a double agent, but Ted tells him it's all left up to the Inspector General at this point. Bothered by the news, Ben begins to go over the details of the explosion, trying to see if he missed anything. He heads back over to the CIA, but realizes his security badge has been restricted. He is greeted by IT specialist Desmond, who pretends to know Ben but secretly tells him to play along. Desmond gets him through security, explaining that the IG has restricted his access pending the investigation into Farah. He knows Ben is looking for intel and wants to help, as Farah was one of the best people he ever worked for. They look for all the international agencies present around the area when Farah died, and they find quite a few, which is intriguing, but one stands out, Karen Taramov. Ben, however, doesn't think the FSB was involved, as he knows that's not Yevgeny's MO. Desmond plans to also run a trace on Ben's laptop to see who has been snooping around. Ben returns home, where he gets an email about Farah from an unknown sender containing articles of attacks around the world and a note telling him to connect the dots. Nick then calls. Nick finally reveals he is no longer in France, but has moved to Croatia because of Veronique. The two plan to meet up in France, but then the connection drops. Before their meeting, Ben plans to head back to Budapest to get some answers. There is a flashback to Ben and Farah having dinner. She reveals the good news that she was promoted to chief of station, and they reminisce on the days when the agency didn't accept their relationship. Farah then gifts Ben a good luck pendant her grandfather gifted to her grandmother, asking him to keep it close as a token of her love. Ben soon lands in Budapest and goes to meet with his former partner and new chief of station John Branca. He wants John's help to look into Farah's death, as he just has a hunch that something is not right. Branca behaves indifferent to Ben's concerns, telling him they don't have much evidence to go against the IG's report and suggesting that Ben go spend time with Nick and leave things to him. Ben senses the change in attitude, tells him thanks, and leaves. He then heads over to the restaurant where the bombing happened, which has been closed down, and flashes of the tragic incident race through his mind. With no help from the CIA, Ben meets with Hungarian intelligence chief Hitchens, who is reluctant to help as it risks her job. However, she shows Ben a smart ring Farah was wearing when she died. She believes Yevgeny's team was able to hack it and track her movements and knew she would be in that location. Whether or not Yevgeny was personally involved is yet to be discovered, and Hitchens gives up his current location. Hitchens then gives Ben Farah's emergency fund, telling him to use it and track Yvguini. Desmond then contacts Ben about the laptop. It is full of sophisticated spyware, and he warns Ben to watch his back as he was being tracked. Ben finds Yvguini in a casino and joins his table for a game of poker. Ben flashes a large sum of cash to him, piquing his interest. Ben wants info on Farah, and Yvguini responds in code, telling him that America's problems are in the mirror. He, however, refuses to say more, telling Ben that they are still enemies. Yvguini's men come to throw Ben out, but Ben engages the men, brutally beating each one down with his skills until he is held at gunpoint, forcing him to stand down. Yvguini can see that he is serious about wanting answers, but tells him his heart has overruled his sense before a man knocks him out. Meanwhile, Nick and Veronique are at home, but she soon heads out to do some shopping. As Nick settles in to get some work done, armed men appear outside his home, calling him outside. One man flashes a badge, requesting him to come with them as he is being tracked by killers. Fearing for his life, Nick follows the men. Ben is brought to a secure location, accusing Yvguini of destroying his life and taking Farah from him. Yvguini gradually understands that Ben has come to clear Farah's name on his own accord. Yvguini signals to one of his men, and Ben thinks he is going to be killed, but he is freed. Ben is sure that Yvguini was involved in Farah's death, but he reveals that Ben is wrong. He shows Ben video footage of the night of the bombing where Ben sees Karen Taramov, who was following them. Ben thinks he is FSB, but Yvguini corrects him, but before he can reveal the true identity of the killer, he and his men are gunned down by a hit squad. Ben barely manages to escape the flying bullets, but the men are closing in on him. Ben manages to get inside a van and call Branca to come and help him in a panic. Ben reverses out of the building, flipping the van in the process. He climbs out, and the men come chasing after him, but Branca pulls up and gets Ben out of there. He tells Ben he is lucky as an FSB hit rarely fails. Ben wonders how he got there so fast and learns Branca had been tracking Yvguini. Ben is now sure that Farah was murdered and he was set up, but is not sure by whom. Branca again tells Ben it's best he stays low and plans to take him to a secure location. Nick is traveling with the agents who explain that a rogue FSB agent tried to kill his father, and Nick is next on the list. Nick gets worried for Veronique, but the men reassure him she is at a secure location. Branca reveals to Ben that he sent the team to collect Nick and was tracking his cell phone. Branca brings Ben to a large boat which he uses as a base of operations. There, Branca explains that the team sent after him were former Chechen mercenaries now working for the Wagner Group, and he has intel that the men were looking for something that Ben might have. Branca asks if Farah ever gave him anything before she died, and Ben becomes suspicious at his line of questioning. Ben denies ever receiving anything from her and asks to talk to Nick, so Branca leads him to a satellite phone. Meanwhile, Nick is brought to a building, but he senses that something isn't right. He attacks his two escorts and tries to escape, but is stopped at gunpoint. Ben is brought to a room where he is shocked to see the same hit team holding guns to him, and Branca tells him to sit. Ben now realizes that Branca has betrayed him. They sit Ben in a chair and prepare to torture him for information. Ben cannot believe the man he worked with for 8 years and always had his back has turned traitor, but Branca just wants to know what Farah gave to him. Ben tells him Farah gave him a son, a home, and a life, but Branca asks for the room. Ben reminds Branca that he is well trained, but Branca begins to insert needles into Ben's fingers. Branca demands to know what Farah gave to him, running a current through his hands when he refuses to talk, giving him smelling salts to bring him back from unconsciousness. Ben refuses to talk, preferring to grit his teeth and bear the pain. Branca is alerted that Nick has arrived at the safe house, so he wonders if Nick can bear the same pain as him. Ben threatens to kill him if he touches Nick, but Branca leaves without a word. Another man comes in to continue Ben's torture, and Ben realizes it is Karen. Ben wants to know his name, as he likes to know the names of the people he kills. Karen tells him Americans are not all powerful, revealing how in the late 80s the leader of the CIA was captured by terrorists, tortured, and killed. The same happened to the head of the KGB, but the KGB kidnapped a family member of the terrorist leader and mailed his body parts until the KGB leader was released. As he prepares to begin his torture, he is knocked out and the other men killed by an assassin, a Russian agent, Kristina Kalvarsky. She frees him, but Ben is too weak to escape the way she came. They have to fight their way out of the ship. Kristina throws a flashbang and unloads on the entire room. But just then Karen throws her overboard and attacks Ben. Ben is weak, but he stands his ground and fights back. Karen grabs a blade, and Ben locks in, evades his strikes, and disarms him. The fight leads out onto the deck, but Ben uses Karen's own pin to stab him before knocking him overboard with a metal pipe. Ben and Kristina then escape on her boat and make it back to shore. Ben wonders if he can trust her, but Kristina reminds him she just killed 8 mercenaries to save his life. Kristina then reveals that she is under orders from Farah and asks if he has the pendant she gave to him. She tells him it is a key, and she will take him to an address. Kristina then shockingly reveals that the men who kidnapped Nick are the ones who betrayed Farah. Turns out Farah was in charge of a few deep cover assets and was about to expose a money laundering operation. She didn't inform Ben as she found out a U.S. operative was behind the scheme. Kristina was one of 7 persons working for Farah, but is the only one left alive. She owes Farah and promises to help Ben stop this. Meanwhile, Nick is being held in a room with the agents standing by awaiting orders. Just then, Karen enters the room. He tells Nick that he looks just like Farah, whose biggest mistake was trusting him, indicating that he is responsible for her death. Kristina brings Ben to a safe house, where there is a locked room. The necklace pendant opens the door to the room where Farah operated out of. There, Kristina further explains how she and Farah knew each other before they both joined their respective organizations, and they were friends before anything. Ben finds a laptop on which he sees intel on John Branca receiving bribes from foreign intelligence agencies, along with none other than Deputy Director Williams, who had Farah killed and is Branca's boss. There is also a video of Farah meeting with Yvguini, and Ben thinks she was working with them all along, but Kristina doesn't want to jump to conclusions. Ben then calls Branca, telling him he has the intel he wants, so Branca proposes a trade for Nick and gives a time and location. Kristina warns that he may be walking into a trap, but he's willing to risk it for Nick. As the two head out, Ben is still fuming over the truth about Farah. Kristina warns that if he hands over the intel, then her death would have been for nothing, but he has to get Nick back. He sends the intel to Desmond, asking him to take a look. The two then get to the location where Kristina gets off first to set up a sniper position. Ben gets to the actual spot where Branca and his men are waiting, while Kristina gets to a rooftop where she has a clear sight of the deal going down. Ben steps out with the bag. Branca releases Nick to him, so Ben hands over the bag, promising to disappear for good, but Branca has other plans. He signals to his men, but Kristina opens fire on the men until Branca returns fire on her. Ben knocks Branca down, grabs the bag and a gun, and jumps back in the van with Nick, with Branca and Karen giving chase in their own car and opening fire. Ben hands Nick the gun, telling him to gather himself and kill or be killed. Nick does his best to return fire while Ben whips the car around corners. Nick runs out of bullets, and Branca begins to gain on them. As Branca pulls up alongside, Ben slows and pits his car, causing him to crash. Branca is thrown from the car, while Karen is impaled on the windshield. He brags that at least he killed Farah, so Nick blows him up. They get back to the car, and Ben is proud of him. There is no sign of Branca, and Ben suspects that he may have survived and plans to find him. Ben tracks Branca down, and the two face each other and begin to fight. Branca feels confident as he knocks Ben down, but Ben eventually hits him with some heavy shots before getting him in a headlock and choking him out. Later, one of Branca's agents comes to pick him up, but Ben warns the agent not to get involved anymore and walk away. Kristina meets up with them briefly, and Ben hopes that after this has passed, they can work together, and Kristina agrees. Ben then loads a bound Branca into the car and takes off. Later, he contacts Desmond, and they hatch a plan to take Williams down with the intel. Ben then contacts Yvguini, who had survived his attack. Meanwhile, Williams is holding an international conference when everyone begins getting the intel on Williams on their cell phones, and the projector is hacked. Just then, Yvguini walks into the room along with his officers. He tells everyone it's nice to see his old enemies where no one is tied to a chair, then confirms that Williams is guilty and orders his officers to arrest him. In the end, Ben finally meets Veronique and reveals he is now the French chief of station, and Nick thinks Farah would be proud of him.